I'm Mavius Lynn. I'm a practicing occultist as well as a ceremonial magician. And today we have a very special interview. I'm so excited about this. We will be doing the topic of Norse paganism. And let me allow our special guests to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Bente. My pronouns are they, them, but he and she is also fine. I am from northern Germany, which that's why my accent is a little bit weird if anyone's wondering. I am a witch who focuses on Scandinavian practices and also a Norse pagan.
Wonderful. And what a joy it is to have you on this interview. So, for our first question, for those who may be hearing about this topic for the first time, what is Norse paganism?
Norse paganism is nowadays in present day the reconstructed religion or spiritual beliefs of the pre-Christian Scandinavian peoples. So mostly from the Viking Age, because that's basically the last era before Scandinavia was Christianized. But of course, some of the beliefs are also much older than that. But yeah, our sources are mainly from the late Viking Age and early Christian times in in Scandinavia. So yeah.
Okay, great. And so I often hear the term paganism as an umbrella term. How is Norse paganism different from other types of paganism?
So I mean, of course, it's different because it's the specific type of paganism that was practiced in Scandinavia back in the day. Yeah, I think though that there are some things that make it kind of unique, because of course the practices from different cultures and different types of peoples are will always be different. But I feel like in Norse paganism there are some things that just make it kind of a little bit unique. And one of the things that I always find is very important is that there's not so much a focus solely on the gods and goddesses. There are actually Norse pagans out there who don't even worship or work with the gods and goddesses, but who more so focus on the different types of spirits, which there are a lot of different types of spirits in Norse paganism, which I personally find very fun. But they're also kind of there's not that much of a clear-cut differentiation between different types of spirits. So that's maybe also what is a little bit unique about Norse paganism, because you don't really have a clear-cut definition for what this type of spirit is and what this type of spirit is. So they kind of flow into each other a little bit, and some types of spirits can also become other types of spirits. So that is very interesting, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it sounds like, would you agree, just sort of on this particular topic, that it allows room for people to have their own personal relationship with these spirits and to learn from that?
Definitely. Definitely, especially because there are so many spirits where you have kind of a generalized idea of what that type of spirit is, but also different types of sources contradict each other and kind of group different types of spirits together who in other sources are different types of spirits. So and you of course also have like gods and goddesses that are only mentioned like in one sentence. So if you want to worship them, or if you want to work with those types of spirits that are lesser known, you kind of have to rely on your intuition and kind of form your own relationship to them, because nobody is there to spoon feed you the information, because it's just not there.
Yeah, definitely. I relate to that in my own practice as well. Uh, so, what inspired you to pursue practicing Norse paganism?
So I think nowadays that it was my ancestors who kind of pushed me in that direction, because as I said, I'm from northern Germany. I actually was born and raised and lived for 18 years in a small city right on the Danish border. And that that area of Germany was actually Danish up until like around 150 years ago. And it is in the area where this specific belief would have been practiced. And yeah, my ancestry is mostly Scandinavian, as you might guess from where I'm from. But for a long time, I didn't really know that, and kind of stumbled more into witchcraft and Wicca in the first place. But then I got really interested in just like the general historical part of the Viking Age, and kind of started reading a lot of books, but more like archaeological books. But from that kind of came the interest in also the religion, of course, from that time, and the magical practices. And yeah, from there, kind of the ball got rolling, and the first deities came in, and yeah. But yeah, in if I had to I don't know, pinpoint it nowadays, I would guess that it was probably my ancestors who pushed me in that direction.
That's so beautiful. I love hearing about your journey. And on the topic of ancestors, this is a great sort of segue into another question I had for you. So, on the topic of practicing, whether or not something is a closed practice concerns a lot of people. For those who aren't familiar with that term, a closed practice is something that you can be a part of if you're born into the community or if you've been initiated into it. So, would you consider Norse paganism to be a closed practice?
Definitely fucking not. Although there are some people who kind of try to make people believe that it's closed. It's definitely not, and there is no reason why it should be closed. Like, it's not like the people who practice it are a minority group who need to kind of protect it. There is no rules in any of our sources that says that it was ever closed. And actually, there is evidence that Viking villages were very multi-ethnic. So there's also no reason to assume that the Vikings were racists or something like that. And it's a dead religion. It's a reconstructed religion. There is really no reason why it should be closed. And I feel like a lot of the times, sadly, it's either racism or xenophobia that makes people say that, because I feel like, especially it's a lot of the times it's Europeans who kind of hate on Americans, and who feel like Americans will kind of destroy the faith because they only learn from Marvel movies. And yeah, it's just wrong. So yeah, it's definitely not closed. Anyone who wants to can practice it, no matter their skin tone, no matter their gender identity, no matter where they're from. It doesn't matter.
I don't know about you, but I've learned everything I know from Marvel movies. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, I guess that really brings up the point in terms of being drawn to a particular practice or belief system or religion. So would you say if someone has a genuine interest in Norse paganism, that that's enough of a pull to start practicing or reading into it?
Yes, definitely. I feel like the only thing that really matters is that people understand the difference between the Marvel universe and actual Norse mythology, and that they just take it seriously and do their research properly. I think that is just, I mean, you should do that with every religion and with every practice that you get into. You should always be respectful with it and approach it in a proper manner and do your research. And as long as one does that, feel free to practice it.
That's wonderful. And so I'm going to get a little personal here. In your current practice, which gods or goddesses most resonate with you now, and why?
So it's pretty funny, because actually recently one deity has left the chat. But I'm currently now working with Odin and Freya, who, like, Odin was the first one I ever properly worked with, and then afterwards came Freya, and then also Hel, Thor, and Loki. But I feel like still the two that I most feel connected to will probably always be Odin and Freya. And I guess it's because both of them, or like they're the two deities in Norse mythology that are connected to kind of magical practices the most. Because, for example, Odin, he he discovered the secret of the runes, for example, and is very much tied to runic types of magic and more like oral types of magic. But he also practices Seidr, which is usually seen as more of a women's type of magic, or it was at least seen as a more women's type of magic. Nowadays, luckily, that's not the case anymore. And he actually learned it from Freya, who's kind of the OG Seidr practitioner. Yeah, so I guess that is like the most part, but I also really, really connect with this aspect of Odin where he's a wise wanderer. He wanders the worlds and he does basically whatever he needs to do to gain wisdom and knowledge. And I very much connect to it. While I maybe not, I may probably not sacrifice an eye for knowledge and wisdom like he does. But I will go through a lot of very boring books to gain knowledge and wisdom. Yeah, Freya is she's just a badass. She's such a badass. Like, I feel like a lot of the times if we have images of goddesses, a lot of the times it's like motherly, calm, collected, nice goddess, and Freya is she's just a badass. Like, she's very sexual, which I find very, very cool about her. And she just does whatever she wants, and yeah, she doesn't let anyone tell her what to do. And I very much love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just hearing you talk about that, like I think that's so incredibly beautiful to hear you have those relationship with the gods and goddesses, and especially with Freya. That's really cool. So what are some things you wish you knew as a newbie practitioner?
I feel like that is such a good question. I feel like the thing that would have probably helped me the most is to know that, one, as I said, anybody can practice Norse paganism. And the thing is, the online sources that you can find, the people who create content on the topic of Norse paganism, are mostly white men who are mostly reconstructionist Norse pagans. So if you start tumbling into it and you not only read about it, but you also watch content on it online, you will quickly kind of get this image of you have to be a white male and you have to be a reconstructionist Norse pagan. And both of that is not true. Like, if you're queer like me, you are totally accepted in Norse paganism. And if you identify as a woman, you're also totally accepted in Norse paganism. And you don't have to be a reconstructionist. Being more of an intuitive pagan is totally, totally fine. There is nothing wrong with that. Of course, as long as you still stay true to the sources that we have. Like, if what you practice completely goes against anything that you will see in the sources, of course, maybe think about that twice. But it's still totally fine to have more of an intuitive approach to it than a reconstructionist approach.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful comment too about approaching things in a more intuitive way, because I feel like I mean, of course, like I come from a slightly different tradition and path than you, but oftentimes I find that our unverified personal gnosis or our own personal relationship with deities or ourselves are completely valid. I mean, it may not apply to everyone else, but that is just important to cultivate that innermost spark and your own personal relationships and findings. So on the topic of people who are newbies, who are possibly watching this video excited about Norse paganism, excited to get going, in your experience, what are some red flags to look out for when doing your research or getting involved in a group?
Ooh, I mean, when it comes to groups, definitely stay away from focused or focus groups, because those are usually the groups who are racists, who are queerphobic. They will literally say in their codex, like, we only want white, typical traditional families. So that is already very fucked up. So definitely stay away from the AFA and Odinism. Definitely stay away from those. Those are not cool to be with. Apart from that, probably everyone should like do their research on how Norse paganism has been misappropriated by the Nazis. because it's still done a lot of the times, unfortunately, and there are a lot of symbols that are just used in that context, which have kind of found their way back into Norse paganism, kind of like the Odal rune, which is the Othala rune, just with the little feet. So, for example, if you see symbols like that, that is already a red flag. Definitely stay away from any group or person that uses these symbols, or maybe ask them if they know where it's from. Maybe they just don't know and you can educate them about it. But yeah, anything like that, like focus groups, anyone who just remotely feels like they want to exclude someone from the faith, already a red flag.
Definitely. And those are fantastic things to keep in mind, especially, I mean, I certainly would, before I get into things, do a lot of research, but that's so important. So thank you for sharing that too. What resources do you recommend for someone who wants to learn more?
So I always have like 3 books that I recommend for like complete beginners, because of course the typical sources like the Eddas and the sagas and Saxo's History of the Danes and everything like that should be a given, of course, but I feel like as a complete beginner, I think you can't expect a complete total beginner to get into the Eddas and the sagas right away, because they are not easy to read, especially if the translation in your language is a bad one and an old one, like the German one is very old and sucks. I feel like for complete beginners, a good starting point for the mythology part and the cosmology part is Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. It is not 100% accurate to the Eddas, so you have to keep that in mind. But apart from that, I feel like it is so easy to read, so it's a good entry point. And then afterwards, you can go into the Eddas, and then while you're already kind of familiar with it, it will be easier to read the Eddas. Then I actually just 2 weeks back or so, I finished reading a book which I find fantastic. It is The Children of Ash and Elm by Neil Price. And it's basically just a book all around the Viking Age, which you could think like, well, what does that have to do with Norse paganism? But I personally feel like it is extremely important to also learn about the cultural context that the religion stems from, because the cultural context, of course, has a lot to do with how the mythology came to be and stuff. So that is a book that I definitely recommend. It's amazing. It's very thick, but it pretty much encompasses everything around the Viking Age. So definitely great, and it's also easy to read. And then lastly, when it comes to more of the practice nowadays, I really like The Way of Fire and Ice by Ryan Smith, because there are a lot of like beginner asatru books out there, but this one is specifically on inclusive paganism. So it also includes a lot of resources on what you should stay away from, which symbols have been appropriated, and it's honestly, it's great.
Awesome. And this has been a fantastic interview. So I definitely want to wrap it up by asking, where can people find you and what are some projects you're currently working on?
Mm-hmm. You can basically find me anywhere under the name The Norse Witch. Sometimes it's with underscores between the words and sometimes not. For example, on Instagram, it has underscores, but I don't remember on which platforms it's which way. But I'm basically on any platform. Like, of course, YouTube is my main, but I'm also on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. I recently also got to Twitter. I also have an online shop for sustainably and ethically sourced witchcraft and paganism tools. So if anyone wants to check that out, that is always linked on all of my social medias, of course. And do I have a project at the moment? Actually, I don't think so.
Well, I think your YouTube channel is a fantastic resource for people, and all of those links mentioned will be put in the description of this video. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today for this interview. It's absolutely wonderful, and all of my socials will also be in the description if anyone needs that. So as always, thank you for joining and watching, everyone. I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you.